Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversation about organization design for AI adoption. And trying to help you with leading with empathy, innovation, and alignment. There's a lot of changes that have come forward with AI entering the tech stack for everyone, and want to talk about what the people side of that is a little more. I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations about the technology and the technical side of that, security, what have you. But let's talk a little bit more about the people side of that. First, before we get started, if anyone would like to have further conversations with us, please, you'll see a link in the chat that will allow you to book time with us to have further conversations after this. Certainly happy to take questions at the end as well. But please look for that link and feel free to book time with us to carry on the conversation. So over the last 20 years in IT, there have been a lot of changes, and we've dealt with changes like AI before. We had the mobile revolution in 2007 when smartphones emerged and started offering new possibilities and capabilities for people. Also new challenges for the organization in IT. Cloud, as those technologies emerged, and the rise of data science had similar effects on the workforce and on IT and how it had to react to things. Hybrid work in 2020 changed things for everybody. Now AI is just the next example of that, and we want to talk today about how we enable the organization to embrace that and get all the value from that you can. So because of all those changes in technology, today isn't the same as it was. We used to operate more in physical, location-based work. We'd go to our office and our cubicles and get our work done, then go home. Not really the case anymore, where we're able to work from anywhere. That was a challenge for IT to enable. How do we allow everybody to work anywhere they need to, and the freedom and that allows for, while still making sure that we're doing that in a responsible way. Data used to be secured more within purpose-built apps. Now it's everywhere. How do we control the flow of data everywhere? Those are challenges that had to be addressed. Technology adoption as a whole used to be IT-led in a lot of ways, and they tend to be more driven by the infrastructure. Now, mobile really changed this, where I can have apps there that users say, hey, why don't I have this in the enterprise? And really drove IT to respond then to that in a different way they had before. Used to have more directed user interfaces on technology. Here's the form. You'd have training binders for how to use the technology. Now, as we move to more natural user interfaces and user experiences in tech, and even onto conversational computing, which AI allows for, you're not going to need that training the same way. It's really going to be up to the users as to how they want to use the technology in creative and new ways. It used to be we were really limited by the technology that we were allowed to use, and now we're shifting to a place where really imagination is going to be encouraged. If you really want to get the most value from these new technologies, particularly with artificial intelligence and all the things that it can do, creativity, imagination is going to be very, very important. So with all this, IT specifically had challenges with, and particularly with security, had to move from more of the no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, to really saying, okay, how do we say yes? How do we do that in a responsible fashion? There are a number of things that had to change within IT organizations and within the industry as a whole to allow for those modern approaches to using technology, and security had to mature along with that. So there was more enabling and less restricting. Whether you're moving from device and network controls to more identity access controls to allow freedom there. Data, device, and users were mobile. Now security had to kind of follow along where it wasn't dictating how things were going to be. And now with AI agents, we need to treat them from a security standpoint as other users. So how do we enable that? Well, this is where zero trust entered. And while the model for zero trust is never trust, always verify, And it's a very strong approach for controlling technology and any new technology. It started with cloud, and it's really kind of the framework for securing AI as well. Despite the name, zero trust really helps increase trust of the technology, which ultimately drives adoption and being able to realize all of the value from these new technologies. If you have the strong security in place, we found that with new technologies, people are enabled to work in new and creative ways, being able to work from home, being able to leverage new technologies at a faster pace than ever previously available. Really kind of got away from the model of the people versus IT and became more the people and IT together. So as we move into the AI era, what's a little different here? We've solved that kind of IT security concerns, but now that AI is truly a human-first technology, really is driven, the most value is going to come from your employee base and them solving for the problems that they're seeing every day in creative and new ways and leveraging the technology for that. What does the org need to do in order to change to adapt to that? So IT's responsibility in that is to provide a secure and reliable platform that can withstand all the creativity that's going to be coming its way. So how do I ensure that I have the responsible mechanisms in place to allow people to do what they want to do, what would be valuable to them? HR challenge for them is going to be, how do I develop a culture where employees can create the most business value from AI? And that's something Megan's going to talk about in depth as we proceed with our conversation today. But really, that's all great, but at the end of the day, we need leadership involved here in dictating, hey, here's where the org needs to be structured in order to leverage this, but also ensuring that AI is used to create business value and isn't just another toy, right? I mean, the danger here too with all the creativity is that it just becomes playtime. And so how does the org create a structure and create an environment that allows for people to be creative with a purpose? And this is really where AI, while you have your security needs and that, you really need to enable the organization to change so that it can allow users to realize the full value from technology. And we're going to start with that with Kate talking about the leadership's approaches towards how organizations will change in that world.
Thank you so much, Joe. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I think that Joe really says it well. It's just the title of that last slide, and that AI is a human-first technology. Here at Concurrency, we're always using people process technology as like a guidepost, right, for us to talk about how you successfully implement technology. And I would love to say, like, the rise of the frontier firm is really all about the people. If you were to think, hey, this is the future of the org chart, if you will, this is a really good place to start. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but this is the 2025 Work Trend Index. It's an annual report put out it's written and published by Microsoft. So if you're not familiar, I definitely would recommend you take a look at this. It really kind of shows a phased approach, one in which that we at Concurrency are even adopting, starting with the individual employee using AI as their own assistant, building that up to the employee having multiple assistants, and then really taking it further than that and understanding how that employee would actually become what we call an agent boss, if you will. So, the employees will increasingly build and then delegate and manage AI agents to be more productive. Next slide, Joe. Thank you. All right, so, I don't know if any of you joined Brian Hayden's presentation earlier, but, one of his big themes is really building agency with your people. So, if you really look at the fact that 81% of leaders are planning on using that digital labor, or, we say those agents, in the next 12 to 18 months, we really have to figure out how do we manage all of that knowledge that is at our fingertips still considering the people along the way. One of the things that we're thinking about is succession planning. Another pretty important statistic that came out of this study is that there's such a shortage, especially in IT talent. When you think about 53% of leaders are saying, hey, we want more. And you have 80% of employees saying, yeah, but we're burned out. Now, what about the other 20% of these people? A lot of that, a lot of those individuals in that 20% are thinking about retiring. So, we need to be really thinking about how do we organize our future org chart with our current employees, and do we want to even replace some of the people that are retiring, or can we create those efficiencies and incorporate them into our plan using a human employee first model? Couple of things that I want to talk about before I turn things over to Megan. Really the importance of it starts at the top. I really want to talk about the importance of aligning anything that you do, any adoption of AI needs to align with your business goals. Really starting with that North Star. A couple of things that you want to think about is, really the fact that adopting AI is something that will enable all of your employees to do more, that will get you and your entire organization into that, promised land, if you will, aligning with those goals. The next thing I would say is, use the data, your own data, so that you can show the momentum and how adopting this is making your business better as you go. There's a lot of great statistics in that article that I'm not going to spend my time, reiterating here, but there's a lot of different ways that you can build data use case scenarios as you're doing this. And again, this whole presentation is around how you emphasize that human AI partnership. It doesn't replace people, really, it's going to augment them. The way that we see it is that we're even going to have interns that are managing an agent to make their job better, to increase their productivity, and they'll be learning along the way. And last but not least, I think it's really important to start small. Start small, scale fast, and start with augmentation, not just, focused only on the efficiencies, but how do you augment an individual's role versus thinking about replacing? That's not where we want to go with this. It's really about that augmentation. I would propose that you start with a pilot program and, again, follow those top 3 points to really ensure that you see success as you build that future org chart.
All right, so I'm super excited to be able to talk to this group. I know a lot of times we're talking about technology, and I'm very excited that this new age of AI agents is bringing to light the importance of a culture. And I've spent over 15 years working with organizations, universities, manufacturing, hospitality, tech, really trying to figure out how we do this. And prepping for this conversation, it was really interesting talking to Joe and hearing about the history of IT and how zero trust security came about. And we sort of had this moment of, well, that's kind of what we need to do with culture. A lot of times it's been top down, it's been HR as sort of the police, it's been here's the handbook, here are the rules. And let's be honest, how do those rules get in the handbook? Usually because someone broke them at some point, which I would love to hear all the stories of how those came to be at some point. But I digress. So we need to now create a culture where we give a little bit more freedom and empowerment to the people, and that we're looking at culture, not just sort of a top-down dictation, and how do we create the bounds where the culture is developing and maturing as people are interacting with each other and with technology. And so here are some bullets to kind of think about when you're creating the zero trust culture. You want to be intentional. I've heard a lot of stories from different people who've said, we wanted to change the culture and my boss told me to plan parties, or the leader said that they want to mirror culture and how I operate. And so, go infuse that, right? Or I hired you because we're trying to change our culture. And while those are small elements of a culture, we know that's not going to solve it. We have to be aligning what we want our culture to be with our organizational goals and with our hiring practices and with how we operate within the organization. As if you caught Brian Hayden's presentation earlier today, he outlined that really well. Part of being intentional is looking at your values. Do the values you have, are they actually what you like to celebrate? Are they actually what allow you to be successful? And do your most successful people demonstrate those values? Do you demonstrate those values when you're making business decisions? That's how you're going to reinforce it. And then along that, the org chart alignment, right? So as Kate discussed with the Frontier firm, org charts are getting another look. They're now going to include the digital workforce, and we have to think about what that looks like. Another thing to consider is, should it still sort of be this hierarchical triangle where it's sort of top down, or should we be looking at a more circular approach to that, and the view? And then communication paths, a big part of that, and why we should relook at it is that it's going to be more important now than ever to have communication paths that go left, right, up, down, angle. We talk about an intern in a company, and they may be up at midnight playing with an agent or trying something out or watching a YouTube video or a TikTok video about something that they could do, and then they get on their computer and they start doing it. They might discover something that would be really valuable for the CEO to know. So we have to kind of check ourselves and be like, do we have the paths where that can happen, where that knowledge share can happen, since everything is moving so fast now? And then psychological safety. I think it's a common thing that we hear about nowadays, which is really good. It's thrown around a lot, but to actually create that can be extremely challenging, and I think needs a lot of measurement and thought behind it. As Joe explained too, we're going to need a lot of creativity. We're going to need space for creativity in this new sort of phase of our world at the moment. And a big part of allowing creativity is allowing mistakes, is allowing people to be bold. And so do you have a safe space for that to happen is going to be more important than ever. So with this topic, we could go down a bunch of different avenues, and the one we want to focus on today is the value piece. It's typically where I might start with a client, is to just go, okay, we need to be intentional about it. Let's look and see, are your values sort of inhibiting a future culture that would support AI agents? So it'd be a great place to start. So we work together to come up with what are some values that we know you're going to need to have present in some form to be successful in this next phase of our work world. And so it's human first, collaboration, creativity, and accountability. So we'll jump into this human first, which we've heard a lot about all day today, starting with our keynote speaker, Todd. And so a lot of times we think about AI, we think about technology, and we immediately go, what about us? What about the humans? Is this going to be a takeover? And I know it's been mentioned in a lot of other sessions too, like there are some negative sides to technology that we have to be thoughtful and aware of. And part of mitigating that is to not forget that AI and AI agents need to have a human first mentality for it to work. So what does that mean? It means prioritizing our employees, our customers, the way that we set up the agent, thinking about that. And one example I like to think about that Todd actually mentioned this morning in the keynote is this Klarna example where, and what a gift that CEO has given us to take such a risk and let so many people go, which is not a gift, only to realize that his quality fell. His customer service quality fell. And now he's realizing the importance of not just looking at AI replacing humans, and really thinking about, hey, it's not just about efficiency. We have to protect quality as well. And now he's got a human-focused strategy moving forward. So thank you, Klarna, for making that mistake for us. And then we'll make sure to keep that in mind. So in this human first model, we broke it down a little bit further and how you can think about what this might mean for your organization. First and foremost, we have to think about ethics. We have to think about the integrity of it. Is this agent secure? Is it creating a safe environment? I think there are plenty of examples out in the world right now how AI is maybe influencing people in a negative way. So we need to be thinking about that. We want to protect quality and human experience. So we need to think about the process, the decision, the outcome. Is it going to align to what our people need, what our culture supports, and all of that? We want, and with that, we want transparent AI and automation. I know there's a lot of questions too about how do I know what to create an agent for? And I think we have found that if you have really clear SOPs, standard operating procedures, if you know step by step what needs to happen, if you've done a RACI chart and you know who's accountable and who's contributing to it, those are going to be really great places to start when creating your agent, because you will have that transparent awareness of what you're trying to do. And then as you build it, you just need to make sure that you can see how it's making its decisions as well. Digital well-being becomes a big piece of this human first. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not supposed to look at my phone before I go to bed. I've heard that it does not promote quality sleep. I also have children, so I'm very aware that like more screen time doesn't usually equal happy kids. So these are really real things for us to consider. I've been in some conversations trying to understand whose responsibility is it? Is it the employee's responsibility or the organization's responsibility to manage this? And what we know as organizations is it's harder than ever for our employees to find satisfaction and happiness as our world becomes more focused on screens. And so we do need to keep that in mind. And whether that's making some intentional thought to pull people out of their screens and connect in a different way, or if as we're building these agents, it's just something to keep front of mind. And then again, this has been mentioned in the summit today as well, as this upskilling. We have to be able to skill up faster than we ever have. And we need to make sure our culture empowers people to learn from anywhere. We don't necessarily have the time to set up the training plan and to put people through sessions that are linear. We have to figure out, how do we learn from each other in real time? How do we support giving people time to look into that and to share information? The next one that we wanted to call out here is collaboration. And collaboration is going to change because it's not just about collaborating with humans, which I think we can all agree can sometimes be hard enough. I've been on enough group projects in college to know that it's not always an easy task. But now we have to think about collaboration as human to human, human to digital, how we're going to solve problems using that partnership between people and machines. And then keeping that trust and transparency and not losing sight of our purpose. So as we jump into this, thinking about that human and machine synergy, I had a little bit of a tiff with my co-pilot putting this presentation together, and I created these images you see with my co-pilot buddy, so we collaborated on those. Pretty proud of them. Hopefully you love them. But I went to go get my image for accountability, and I said, hey, keep on this same theme, keep the bright blue accents, and show me accountability between humans and AI. Go. And it showed me an image of a robot with a sad face. And I thought, well, accountability is not sad. You know, it can sometimes feel that way. It's not necessarily the most fun, sexy thing, but I had to explain to Copilot, accountability actually makes people happy. So take the sad face away. And we were able to find common ground, but it was a moment of me realizing that, okay, I'm thinking this is going to be obvious and it's not to the agent. Even just me understanding what is an agent capable of. There was another time I was trying to get it to format my slide, and however I was asking it, it just wasn't capable of. So I was getting really frustrated and I needed to educate myself. So we're going to see those moments more and more. Cross-functional fluidity. So when we use an agent, it's likely not just going to be for me and my work. There are going to be those agents, but the most impactful ones are going to span across the organization. So now I have to work with people outside of my department and really understand, hey, this process starts with me here. What happens when it gets to you? Is there a place for efficiency and where an agent would work? And then as the organization changes and grows and people change and processes change, I need to stay very well connected with those people to make sure we are tweaking our tool when it's needed. Shared intelligence, not only am I putting information into this agent, but it's grabbing it from the web, it's grabbing it from our documents that, you know, Susan over in that other department might have put it in this folder if I've asked it to sort of check this folder. So it's just another thing for us to be thinking about, looking at, and revisiting. We need to look at AI not as a competition. You know, there is this idea of, will it take my job? But even as Kate called out, we're going to see a lot of people retiring, and we don't necessarily have the workforce coming up the ranks in the same volume. And so it's more likely that we get to use agents to take away some of the most frustrating parts of our job and allow us to lean more into the things that we love, which will be a really cool opportunity. And then radical candor and feedback forward. As we talk about how we have to interact with each other as humans to make this the most successful tool, and to think about how we have to continue to pivot, and probably faster than we've ever had to before, we have to have really strong relationships with each other. At Concurrency, we talk a lot about radical candor, which, if you don't know what that is, it is a book you can read by Kim Scott, or you can go on YouTube and she has a ton of videos that explain it as well. But it's this idea that if you're caring personally and you're challenging directly, you can be really clear and fast about feedback. You have to think about, you know, how you're filling your coworker's love bucket, which is sort of not really an HR thing to say, but I think we all know what that means, is how am I showing that I care about someone before I have to go and give that direct feedback. And then, you know, the other thing that we say, I think I started to say as like a cheesy HR person, feedback is a gift, clear is kind. Thank you, Brene Brown. But we're hearing it now from all of our people at Concurrency, where, you know, it's like, just give me the feedback. It's okay if it's really messy, and I'll get curious about it, and then we'll figure it out. So that's going to be more important than ever. So the next one we have to think about is creativity. For me, front of mind, I mean, these images, whether you think that they're rudimentary or you like them or you don't, would have taken a lot of time for me to create in the past. So if anyone's worked with some of those creative tools, even just moving one little line could sometimes take way longer than you ever thought it should. And also trying to do image search, you don't really find what you need. And so for me to say, okay, I need some images, I want something fresh, I can go do this and start to spark my own creativity, and now I can hone it in. Really saved a lot of time and was able to produce exactly what I'm looking for. So creativity is going to be able to be acted upon probably easier than it has been in the past. And more people are probably going to come to the table with suggestions in areas that they may have not been able to do before. So as we deep dive into creativity, we look at that human ingenuity and that machine amplification. So exactly what I did. I had an idea. I was like, okay, we're going to create this image, and I'm going to start to tweak it and figure out if I like it, if I don't. And we're working together to do that. I've also used Copilot to put training plans together, like, hey, I've got to do a manager training for this type of organization. Can you give me an outline? And then can you give me 5 bullets within that outline? And where I was maybe experiencing sort of a writer's block, if you will, like, where do I start? There's so many things. Now I have an outline I can start to build off of. So it's a really great tool to just spark that and get you going. Curiosity-driven innovation. For me, curious is like my favorite thing ever. And also, I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan. Hopefully everyone is. And especially being in HR, that's probably no surprise. But there's this clip of Ted Lasso in a bar with his boss's ex-husband. So just stick with me. And he was playing darts and trying to sort of put a wager out there. And Ted puts this whole speech together about curiosity. And so if you haven't seen it, please go Google it, go look on YouTube and go search for it. But he talks about, be curious, not judgmental. And when people are judging, it's usually not about you. It's usually about their lack of curiosity. And so we're in this world now where asking questions, thinking outside the box, staying really curious, whether that's about the humans that you work with or the technology, is going to be really important. Some other highlights here is we have to just make sure that we're still kind of throwing ideas out at the wall, that we're sharing ideas, that we're keeping the humanity first and thinking about, okay, what are our human needs and how can we creatively meet them? I think a lot about just this age of technology and how it can relate back to even the assembly line. And so then you pull up Ford in 1913 and a lot of similarities there. And one thing that Henry Ford missed out on when being creative about so many other things is he put efficiency forward so much that he only made black cars. And customers didn't want black cars. And so he started to lose the momentum that he had gained through his other creativity. So it's just important to continue to check in and think about, okay, are we being creative sort of in the right frame of mind? So now the last value that we really want you to be thinking of as we move forward is accountability. So you can see I collaborated with my co-pilot very nicely to explain to them that accountability is actually a happy thing. And our robot here is smiling and has the nice little check mark. So we work together to get there. But it means taking accountability for our actions, for our decisions, for the consequences. So we'll continue to see a lot of court cases where AI or technology has done something and we have to figure out, okay, who owns that action, right? Like, could that have been avoided? And so it becomes more important. In a world before where we all sat at desks and paper was kind of moved around and maybe decisions happened a lot slower, it was probably easier to operate with a little less accountability. But the speed in which we're happening, the outcomes that can be there, this is going to just be pulled up even more to the forefront. So as we dissect accountability, we look at human oversight of technology. So we go back to the org chart that Kate was talking about, and we do need to know ultimately who is responsible for that agent. And not that we can necessarily hire or fire, we can certainly generate and we could retire an agent, I suppose. But we have to know who is ultimately going to be accountable for making sure that agent is still doing what we need it to do. And if that agent has a different outcome that's valuable to the organization, do we need to make other tweaks to it? Looking at the decision making, looking at the input we've given the agent, training people on how to use this agent if it's a public agent, right? So we still need to highlight that human oversight and accountability to our technology. That transparent systems, We need to know what input has gone into this. What is it doing? Is it aligned with our values? Have people had bad experiences using this agent? Again, that goes back to that feedback loop. We talked about it being ethical. We talked about even in the human first value, how it's a shared responsibility. So even though we have one person accountable, you're going to have people who are responsible for parts of it or who contribute to it. So doing that RACI for the processes that these agents are taking over will continue to be extremely valuable. And then what are the boundaries? Like, what is this agent going to do and what is it not going to do, right? So I'm starting to generate some ideas around hot off the press, but like a manager coach type of agent. But I also will have to be really clear, like that's not going to replace your need to run really key decisions through me or your leader or whoever else, right? So, hey, this can get you to a certain point. But let's, all be on the same page of where authority or validation or double checking needs to exist. The other thing about these agents is it can save a lot of time, right? So we could have, we'll just use Joe as an example because he's so smart. He could go and automate his job so that a 40-hour job is now 20 hours. And maybe the rest of his 20 hours, he's kicking back in his backyard, hanging with his dog, working on projects, right? Now, the question becomes, do we care? Because at the end of the day, he's still getting the work done that we need him to get done in 40 hours. But we should care because now we have to think about engaged employees probably more than ever. If Joe is an engaged employee, then he's going to automate 20 hours of his work and then he's going to go, thank goodness. I now have more time to work on this backlog of ideas I have for the organization, or I now get to work on these more creative projects or these more complex projects that I just haven't had time for that now I get to, right? Or Joe will then go, hey boss, I have a little bit more time. Is there something on your priority list I can help with? Now, we could have him sitting there, but your organization is now probably going to be 10 times better. So we all know that engaged employees are good for the business. We know that, we've heard that. I think as we look to the next slide, we have some stats that we've all seen. I know there's stats too about how revenue increases with engaged employees. This increase in productivity, I think we're at a moment where that will skyrocket. If we look at that probably in 3 years, I bet that number is extremely higher because we can either have the employees who sort of sit still and enjoy their freed time for themselves, or we have employees who give that back to the organization and continue to be engaged and involved in what's happening. So some of the things that we need to be focused on to keep engagement front of mind is, for one, just as individual employees, we want to look at what we can do now and help people do the same. So it's sort of this ownership of, okay, what are our values here at the organization? What have we said are things that are important to us? Am I living those values? Am I being a good employee is one way. And the other way is if you see an employee or coworker that's kind of misstepping or in a bad mood or not treating someone the way that you think that they should, check in on them. It's lead with empathy first. Are you okay? Like, hey, we don't do that at Concurrency. We don't want to do that at Concurrency. Like, can I help you? And that happened at Concurrency as we were shifting our culture and we were trying to drive some change. And it was a lot of leadership saying, this is what it is, this is what it is. And I remember the first moment that an employee had said to us, hey, you might want to check on so-and-so. They brought this up and I, checked in on them and I said, hey, like, that's not how we want to do things here. You should go take this path. And I had like a little giddy party in my office, not that this person is struggling, but that we are now checking on each other. So that's a really cool place to be in engagement and culture. tried and true engagement surveys. I don't think they're going to go away. I know that they can be kind of annoying, but they give you really good information. And if you make sure that psychological safety is present, you're going to get really honest information, which is going to be really helpful in you figuring out how you need to tweak your culture. You want to create space for people to connect and share ideas. Employee resource groups is a great way to do that, but also thinking about other casual ways for connection. This becomes really hard in a remote or hybrid environment, and you have to be a lot more intentional on how you do that. Connection to leaders. How are your leaders checking in with the people within the organization, even one-on-one, understanding what's happening in their life? Are we celebrating personal milestones in people's lives and sharing that information? And then also our leaders asking for feedback. One thing that Kate does at Concurrency, which I really appreciate, is often before a meeting's over, not that she holds us hostage, because that sounds bad, but she really makes sure that everyone gets a chance to say, hey, what can I be doing different? I don't have all the answers. Like, what advice do you have for me? And that goes such a long way in people being able to give that feedback back to her. Maybe not right away because they're kind of shocked, right? And a lot of organizations say that they want that, but then get defensive or don't actually take the feedback. So you might have to take, it might be 5 times of asking that question before someone finally has the courage and sort of prepares themselves to say it, but it's going to go a long way. And then another thing we do here is a quarterly check-in with an engagement form. I love this form so much. It goes through and it asks you to rate what's most important to you, from work-life balance, the work you do, opportunities, people, competitive rewards. I always forget another one, but rank what's most important to you today and then rate how satisfied you are. So I found these can be a lot more effective than a stay interview. And then it helps the employee stop and say, wait, I'm happy here. Why am I so happy? Oh, it's because work-life balance matters to me right now. And I really feel like I have the flexibility and the trust as a human that I'm going to get my job done, and I can tend to family things or fitness or whatever else it is. And the other question that I ask really carefully is, what would a 10 look like? So even if they gave us a rating of a 9, what does a 10 look like? Because a lot of times people put boundaries on what's possible, and it helps the manager very quickly hone in on how can I make this employee's life at Concurrency better? Or let's have a really real conversation about why that probably isn't possible. And sometimes allows you to have these transparent conversations about, is this the right place for you? But ultimately, the purpose is I want every person at Concurrency to wake up in the morning and go, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And if that's not the answer, we got to explore why. So those are some tips to kind of help you think about how to drive engagement. And then just as an overall sort of summary of our presentation, you want to really establish an organizational culture with intention, and really kind of putting that innovation, creativity front of mind. You want to have an AI vision and then those values on an organizational culture that are aligned and communicated, and you've created a structure around. You can consider a center of excellence of people passionate to lead this charge, who might be a good place to connect, to put different layers of people in there, but really making sure we're keeping humans first in this AI new world. And then responsible AI practices to ensure that the alignment is there. And then just enable all your users to create and innovate, feel empowered to do that. But thank you all for coming. It's a topic that I know we're all very passionate about. We try to, put that forward here at Concurrency, and we're helping a lot of our clients think about this, especially as they take on big tech projects that now span across the whole organization. So it's not just, hey, let's help the IT team do this in the background. Now we're affecting an entire organization, and the cultures that aren't aligned in this way, it's becoming incredibly obvious and creating barriers to be successful in their tech plans. So really appreciate it. Please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We always love meeting new people. And then, as Paige has put in the chat, we would love to get a session to talk more about your specific situation if you're interested. I don't see any questions in the chat, but happy to field some if you have any. I know we have 5 minutes, so we can hang around if anyone wants to add anything. Otherwise, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody, for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Joe and Megan.